And it is a football Monday after draft edition of Birds 365. Busy last couple of days for the Philadelphia Eagles, and we're here to break it all down for you. Johnny Mac, Jody Mac, the Mac guys here on Birds 365. You get some sleep last night, McMullen?
No, man.
Not much.
I'm on empty, but everybody is this time of year. It's funny when you see the metamorphosis from Thursday night to Saturday. Nobody shaves in the entire building. It's kind of funny,
They
but it's one of those times of years, and uh, yeah, successful. I would say 3 days for the Eagles.
the Eagles put their work in, and you guys who cover it put your work in. So, yes, that's why I asked you about last night. I thought maybe, just maybe, you got to bed at a decent hour so you can breathe a little bit easier after putting in all that work. And the Eagles surely put in a ton of work. When we were last on Friday morning, was after round one, where the Eagles got two Georgia Bulldogs, two potential star players, two values. Not only did they get talent, but they got value where they got them in the round. So we were singing the praises of Howie Roseman. Well, the hits just kept on coming in both day 2 and day 3, including a trade with yours truly proposed here on Birds 365 on Friday morning. A whole bunch of other people put two and two together and came up with the possibility before the Eagles actually pulled the trigger on it. But I thought DeAndre Swift could be had, and he was, who, of course, is a graduate of the University of Georgia, or, well, no, I don't know. I shouldn't say. I don't know if he graduated or not, but attended classes down at the University of Georgia, which makes him a Bulldog. So drafting, trading, we'll get to the undrafted free agent that the Eagles signed just after. Was there a box that Howie Roseman did not check this weekend, John McMullen?
All ball linebacker. That's about
What?
it.
Yeah, what
Maybe,
the
maybe,
hell? They
maybe.
just refuse to acknowledge. Are they going to play with no linebackers this year? Is it going to be Nakobe Dean out there for every single snap and five up, five back, and one guy in the middle, and his name's Nakobe Dean?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. By the way, yeah, Nakobe will be near 100% if he stays healthy for the snaps. But yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. Yeah, imagine if he sprains an ankle, how bad it gets at
Yikes!
that point. But yeah, I mean, that's probably it. You could argue receiver. I'm a little surprised they didn't add a something at receiver. But they signed Olamide Zacchaeus, and by the way, two St. Joe's Preps guys now with Olamide and DeAndre Swift. Um, so it's like Georgia and St. Joe's Prep for the Eagles. But yeah, I mean, it's tough to complain. I said I was doing a lot of hits after the draft with Xander and after the picks during the entire weekend. And thanks for everybody for tuning in. We did tremendous numbers, but I'm at the point where how long I've sung the praises of Howie Roseman. Jody, you of all people know. And at the beginning, that wasn't very popular. Now it's Tim to the point he never makes a mistake, and I want
Right.
to look for mistakes. And I'm like looking for mistakes, and I admit I can't find them. And I saw Peter Schrager go on the NFL Network and say some people around other GMs around the NFL are getting kind of pissed off about how much praise he's getting. And I said to myself, well, don't make it so stinking easy for him.
Right.
That would be my estimation for these useful idiots. He kind of takes advantage of. And first and foremost, another young general manager. Now, third year, he should be getting his feet under him. Is Brad Holmes out in Detroit? And by the way, I think Detroit's heading in the right direction. I think they're going to win that division on paper. I think they're the most talented team. I go back to Dallas Goedert last year. He told me, I don't care what anybody says. Detroit's the most talented team we played last year. And they finally figured it out after starting 1-6, and they finished above 500. All good things. But man, I mean, the assets you're spending to replace DeAndre Swift, who was a disappointment, by the way. So Eagles fans assuming this guy's going to make the Pro Bowl or things like that. He was a disappointment in Detroit. But the assets they're expending, they signed David Montgomery in free agency. They spend the 12th overall pick on Jahmyr Gibbs. He might turn into a Pro Bowl player. That's not the point. It's the point of the valuation you're talking about, Jody, and Howie Roseman. And then you're signaling to Howie Roseman, the biggest shark in the ocean. Oh, by the way, we can't keep this guy.
Right.
He gives him a trinket. And, DeAndre Swift behind arguably the best offensive line in football with the +1 that I've been talking about forever. Jalen Hurts makes running backs better. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes over 1,000 yards pretty easily for this team. And Brad Holmes made it easy for him because if Jody McDonald, no offense to you, Jody, you're a very savvy person, but if Jody McDonald can figure it out and John McMullen can figure it out, well, stinking Howie's on the phone 10 seconds later. You make it easy for him. Yeah. And if you don't like it, stop making it so easy for him.
And I thank Xander Krause, our producer, for putting up the clip of me talking to you. And Les Bowen was on the show with us at the time of me suggesting that he could become available. And if so, Eagles should have interest in a player like DeAndre. They hadn't even gone completely Georgia crazy by adding Kaylee Ringo. They just kept adding Georgia guys. And that had nothing to do with me suggesting the Eagles should pick him up. And truth be told, the fact that he's a St. Joe's high school kid had very little to do with it. I just think he's a talented player. And the numbers games were adding up against him in Detroit. So that's why I said the Eagles should look into it. So Xander put up the clip on Twitter. And sure enough, I get a couple of guys. Oh, but you're way off on the evaluation. You said they could get him for a 7th rounder. No, here's what I said. A day 3 pick, maybe as little as a 7th rounder. Well, they ended up giving up a 4th round pick 2 years down the road. Not 1 year, 2 years down the road. So you tack on at least a year for a round for every year that you move off when you're actually selecting. So 4th round pick 2 years from now is like a 6th round pick now. And yeah, they moved about 20 spots down in the 7th round. Oh, did that keep him from taking the good young tackle from Texas? No, he was still on the board late in the 7th round when they picked. Really? You're going to nitpick because I said a day 3 pick, which may be a 7th, turned out to be a 2 years down the road 4th? You're going to go, wow, you were way off on the compensation the Eagles had to give. Are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah,
I don't even know. The guy Howie was masterful this weekend. Not only in setting up his draft board, getting value, getting Georgia players, and I do want to bring that up with you at some point. Could that actually become a question mark of reliability? But that was as good a draft as I've seen in a long time. Everybody's got their grades out, and it's one of the more difficult things to do to grade a draft. Well, it's not difficult, but it's difficult to get it right. You go back and check it 2 years from now. Oh my God, he gave him a B+, and it was exactly a B+. It's very difficult to do, but how do you not just appreciate what Howie Roseman has done the last 3 days?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was trying to figure out bad decisions, and I kind of tweeted out over the weekend. I judge. Draft grades are dumb. I think we can all agree with that. I mean, we don't know. And Peter King in his column put up 2020 and actually went through the picks and how excited everybody. A lot of good players, a lot of bad players, a lot of terrible things happened. For organizations. Look, everybody gets some right. Everybody gets some wrong. Evaluations are evaluations. And I'm not saying that's the most important part of all, but if you stack good decisions, those are the good teams. And you make, and decisions make sense. Those are the good teams. When decisions don't make sense, and I go back to Detroit, they might have picked 2 Pro Bowl players, Jody. They might have picked 2 Pro Bowl players. I have no idea. The decisions don't make sense. So what that tells me is they're going to make more bad decisions moving forward. And if you make bad decisions, you're gonna have more bad outcomes than good outcomes. With the Eagles, and we've seen it play out over the years. If you make good decisions, they don't all work out. doesn't guarantee a good outcome. But if you make good decisions, you got more opportunities for good outcomes. So that's kind of what I judge. And I said, shh, don't tell editors because they all want grades. And nobody knows. Nobody knows. So that's what I grade. I grade decisions. I don't grade players because, nobody. I encourage everybody to look at Pewter's column for two reasons. He was sort of embedded with Las Vegas, but he also went back to the 2020 draft, which is not that far ago, and you could see all the players that already are sort of busts. So, everybody thinks they got a great player. Some are going to be right, some are going to be wrong. And it starts with Jalen Carter for the Eagles. And obviously, in that same column, Peter said he wouldn't do it. And there's a lot of conservative people who wouldn't do it. But, I think he's the best player in the draft, and you get him at number 9. He's not John Dillinger. He's immature. Some people don't. Some people grow up. Some people never grow up. So I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but this kid's so talented. He's going to out-talent people. The value is just off the charts.
All right. You said you were actually making an effort to come up with some questions for Howie Roseman, and they're few and far between on the roster building he's done the last couple of days. I'll throw a couple your way because came up with them on either my CBS show on Saturday night and or WIP yesterday with my buddy Glenn Macnow, and Ray Didinger hopped on with us. I suggested the DeAndre Swift trade on Friday morning. Ray Diddy did the same exact thing on Friday night on NBC Sports Philly. And I like the trade. Again, I might have been slightly off on what the Eagles would have had to give up. So if Detroit did anything right, getting a future, down the road, 2 years down the road, fourth, might actually turn out okay for Detroit. But here's one thing that I do worry about. They get DeAndre Swift. They've already got 4 backs, including Kennedy Brooks, the Oklahoma kid who's looking more and more like a practice squad guy at best again this year. That's 6 running backs. They got how many inside linebackers on this roster? They got 6 running backs, but they've got 2 inside linebackers. Somebody's got to play special teams for this team, John. And I don't know of any of those running backs. And I'm talking about coverage teams. Boston Scott can return kicks. He might even be their kickoff or punt return guy, number 1 guy again this year. Hopefully they can find someone who's even better at it than Boston Scott. But somebody's got to go down and cover kicks and punts. We're all flashing back to the bad punt in the Super Bowl that set the Kansas City Chiefs up at the doorstep and was a contributing factor to the Eagles not winning the championship this year. Special teams was not a strength for the Eagles, although you wouldn't know that by Michael Clay's contract extension. Who's going to be covering for the Eagles this year on special teams on both punts and kicks? Because it doesn't look like they've got a roster full. The draft picks they took this week. Is Keely Ringo going to be a special teams ace? That's one area
he better be.
Exactly. That's one area where I think they've left themselves a little short as of right now. Is that a fair critique?
Too early. They got some, when you look at special teams, it's generally athlete driven. So when you say Keely Ringo, look, most college players who get drafted don't play a lot of special teams because they're all stars for the most part at that level. Even 7th round picks, they're stars at that level. So they don't play a lot of special teams, and they have to sort of learn it at the pro level. And some people take to it, some people don't. But when you can run a sub 4.4, they're going to look at you as a gunner. They signed an undrafted kid from Michigan State who's a linebacker, Ben Van Sumeren, who's got this outrageous athletic profile for his size, but he's got no instincts. That's he can't play linebacker, but maybe you can play special teams. You just run down and you do some things, maybe he has a feel for it. They already have Zach McPherson, Andre Sacheret, people who can play it. Christian Ellis, who was tremendous at it.
He was good
when they jumped, when they finally put him on the field. So they have a group. I mean, they have to get better. No question about that. But, you're right about, fourth running backs, fifth receivers. When everybody wants to put together these fantasy football teams, if you're the fourth running back, you got to help on special teams.
Yes.
It might be Boston Scott's way of kickoff returns, or it might be a coverage guy or what have you. Same thing as a fifth receiver. You got to help on special teams. So it does no good to build up an all-star team, a fifth receiver who can't play special teams. Doesn't work.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that sort of is always pushed to the background. And I always go back to when Dave Fipp was here. The Eagles always kept one or two players that were special team centric. They've gotten away from that a little bit. Maybe they got to get back to it. And that's why I bring up that kid from Michigan State. But Calais Ringo, I mean, look, you're sub 4.4. You got to play special teams. And you got to learn it, and you got to take to it. And if somebody that talented takes to it, they're going to be good at special teams. They're going to be good at it. But a lot of guys don't like it, to be honest.
Right. You got to accept the responsibility. And for a guy like Ringo, who might not be starting or getting a whole heck of a lot of snaps, I'd rather be active playing special teams than not active. But you're higher on the depth chart than somebody else is. When you're a rookie, you just want to get out there on the field and be able to make a play and open some coaches' eyes. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. You got Mac and Mac Birds 365 after a very successful draft weekend for the Philadelphia Eagles. We got two good guests joining us today to talk about where the Birds sit after this good weekend. The first one up is our guy, Hunter Brody. We haven't had Hunter on in about a month. From the best show ever on NBC Sports Philadelphia. Hunter Brody jumps aboard next here on Birds 365.
Do you stream on a Roku?